everything under the sun when it comes to diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. And I'm super excited this week. I'm always super excited. I'm super excited to be joined by Lori Berenstecker, and we have known each other, we figured out like 10 years. And Lori has deep expertise in employee benefits. So we're going to chat today about benefits and inclusion because there's so much happening right now that puts those front and center. But first, Lori, do yourself justice with a great introduction because your background's amazing.
Oh, well, thank you, Maureen. I really appreciate that. And as always, it's such a pleasure to talk with you. And I've always enjoyed every minute, and your expertise just always blows me away as well. I'm an employee benefits consultant. I'm with Alliant Employee Benefits. We're a national firm with over 100 offices across the nation. I'm in the Bay Area in one of our 3 offices in the Bay Area. And we really do a great job working with the mid-market, those that are over 100 up to the jumbos. So we don't get into the jumbos, but in that mid-market space. So our clients are really into this subject right now of how do we make benefits more inclusive and solving a lot of the problems that have come about since the COVID issue has happened, at the pandemic, and some other things in our lives that are touching.
Well, and I think right now we've been talking a lot about the convergence of COVID and the racial justice movement, right? So George Floyd's murder and everything that sparked, right? Everything was really laid bare in terms of inequities of all kinds. And we're seeing even, when it comes to layoffs, who's impacted, that it's folks that are from already underrepresented groups. Just saw that 40% of folks with disabilities have been impacted. Women with children have been really impacted. People, Black, Indigenous, people of color. I mean, we're really seeing what has been a perfect storm. Mm-hmm. And so we're certainly in a mental health crisis. And I think that's one of the things, Lori, that you helped me to see some of the benefits that are out there right now that I think are that folks should know about.
Right. Well, mental health has been a hot topic for quite a while.
Right.
We've had the Mental Parity Act and, trying to get benefits for mental health improved so that people have access. And really, it's the access issue that I think everybody's trying to solve for, the access to care. Another problem that we're having is the demand for mental health providers is outpacing supply.
Right.
So that's a huge problem as well. So, what I've been talking to my clients about, and not everybody has a big budget to go hire Lyra, which, is a great provider, but it can be pretty expensive. Some people are just trying to figure out, well, what can I do as a first layer? And that's what I've been talking to my clients a lot about, because your first level is just looking at what's already offered to your employees. Look at your health plan really closely, understand what are the co-pays, what is the co-insurance, how much does it cost for your employees to go see a mental health provider. We also have an issue with providers being out of network, because with this, short supply of providers that we have, a lot of these providers are out of network. So that means your employees are going to even pay more, the out of network cost for these visits. So what the carriers are doing are they're layering on more providers, virtual providers. The national carriers like Cigna and United Healthcare have both contracted with Talkspace, which is a really fantastic app. Another shortcoming of mental health access is trying to figure out the right provider.
Definitely.
So, it's really hard to get matched up, just by looking at a provider directory that a carrier offers. So Talkspace is really trying to get past that hurdle by, trying to vet questions, asking, what your preferences are and what are you needing and things like that. So that's another really good tool to access providers. Some of the more regional carriers here in California are offering MyStream. I think it's called. I gotta look this up. MyStream. It's Kaiser is doing that. Anthem, Blue Cross, Blue Shield. So they're offering some of those other apps just as well. So that's a really good, just a good way to get some apps. Just make sure your employees know about this. You want to market it.
And I would guess, I mean, because so many of these carriers have been offering these kind of in the moment that we're in, I would guess that if I'm sitting in different parts of the organization, let's say I'm a part of the I&D team, or I'm a manager, or I'm a leader, I might not know that change has happened. So I think go and check too, like actively go find out if some of these apps have been provided.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely the first course of action here, is just finding out, just do an inventory of all your carriers. That's what I do with my groups. Let's, take a look at your carriers. Let's see what value they're providing for your employees. And then once you understand, what's already available to you, you can assess, is it meeting your population's needs, or do you need to layer something on top? You also typically have an EAP, an employee assistance program, through your disability carrier. Again, you want to see if that's really meeting needs. I think everybody would agree that EAPs are one of the most underutilized programs. And sometimes there's some limitations, which is why they're not as utilized. But there's enhanced EAPs that can be put into place that can provide some really good service. They offer some crisis assistance to companies, more sessions, lunch and learns, and things like that. So there's definitely a layering we can look at to see exactly how we can meet those needs for mental health.
Yeah, I mean, because we're in a crisis. I think there are some things, like I saw the Nike Fitness app, which sounds like, oh, it's just going to go make you sweat, and but they've got some mindfulness built into that.
Right.
I've seen the Chopra meditation. There's an app for that. They've released a couple of courses for free. So if you wanted like that mindfulness route too, and then using some of these other apps and resources, because I think right now we have to figure out how to be really creative, and get folks as many of the resources that we can. I think one of the other things is sort of backing up is how important it is for leaders to talk about mental health, and that they understand that this is a time where ask for help if you need it, get that help if you need it, particularly if you're Black, African American, like the shared trauma on top of COVID and how that community is being impacted. I think leaders really showing vulnerability around this. I shared that, I shared with my team, I'll share with people, like, when I'm having a tough week, right? Like, this week is hard for whatever reason. I'm feeling a little, like this is Groundhog's Day, and, can't see our way out of this. So I think we have to also model when it's hard for us, and also understand the difference, right? Like if I'm, that struggling is different than, needing ongoing therapy support. So I think that conversation, right? The willingness to talk about this, the willingness to say, we understand that right now there's a need, and get yourself some help. And particularly for the Black and African American community, because there's this expectation, right, that you're just supposed to be strong, right? And you're just supposed to get through this. So I think that piece is extraordinarily important. So talking about it, letting them know the resources that are available. And Lori, I think, one of the things that you've talked about is having clients really do that assessment and understand. And you're seeing changes all the time, aren't you? That sort of new things are coming, that carriers are providing new things. So maybe that should be a monthly practice.
Yeah, it is something that we have to take a look at, and typically the carriers are announcing whenever they bring on more value added services. But what I find so often is the message just doesn't get to the employees because
Right.
there's
Through
so
all the noise.
yeah, there's so much noise. There's so much coming out there. And when COVID hit, I felt like I think all of my peers felt like we were drinking from a fire hose.
Right.
There was so much information, and I know our friends in HR have been feeling that pressure for months. Um, I think one of the things that I've been really pleased with our organization that we've been doing is putting together a booklet for employees. It's
Mm.
kind of like a self-care booklet where it has like a list of all of these mental health providers, physical fitness apps free.
Yep.
What are people on Peloton? That's how I got on Peloton because they had a 90-day free offer.
Right.
Uh, and also financial wellness, some things that you can do to try to, be smart about your mortgages, your loans, things like that. So we really tried to pull together a bunch of resources for employees to try to make this easy because we know our HR friends have a really difficult job right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's, I think the other piece of this that you and I have talked about, and so then let's jump and talk about childcare here for a moment.
Huge.
Um, how important it is for leaders right now to be flexible.
Right.
Because I
Yeah, this
think if
is
there's
really
any benefit
uh,
that you can extend right now that will help get people through this and really feel supported, and like, that they're included in the conversation, they belong, that you care about them as a leader, is this idea around flexibility.
right.
And that can change day to day, because we're seeing all kinds of different back to school plans happening. We're seeing daycare centers be shut down. Right now, there's data that's coming out that's really alarming about the impact of all of this on women, and women's careers and their career trajectories. So now is the time to say life happens, and it's happening to all of us on this incredible scale right now. We have to be able to see people through. We have to be able to see people through this and be flexible as leaders, because you were talking about, you were just on a call with everybody talking about childcare and nobody really has it figured out.
Right. Yeah, our clients are asking, they're talking among themselves. We're all trying to figure out what is the best path here. I think one of the discussions we had was doing something is better than doing nothing.
Yeah.
And, I think that's where you have to start. What are you going to try to address? One of the biggest problems that I think working families with children have is flexibility in hours. Yeah, that should be one of the first things to address because that one is an easy one for an employer to talk to their employees about. Sometimes it's easy. I do understand there's complications there, but to allow flexible hours, allow an employee to do what they need to do with maybe supporting a child's online class for an hour in the morning, a couple of hours. And there's so many stories of these working parents, moms that are working 12-hour days. It's not like they're not getting their work done, but you just have to be flexible and saying, okay, they may be working at 9 o'clock at night
Right.
instead of
Right.
the typical 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. job.
Well, and I think there's also this idea, and of course, we're talking about roles, right? We're not talking about people that are out on job sites
Mhm.
that are, working manufacturing shift or like frontline employees, right?
Yeah,
And that becomes really difficult because we sort of create this haves and have nots in terms of the ability to be flexible. So where you can be flexible, even ending meetings 10 minutes early so that parents can go and check in on kids, right? Get them a snack, get them settled, get them, when schools start, get them into that next project. Because even that, right? Like these little humans are in your home, and they need support. So I think that idea of flexibility, there's certainly, my hope is that long term, this, again, we've had so much laid bare by this pandemic. This is something that organizations can look at and really think about a long-term creative solution,
Mhm.
because people are going to continue to have children. There will continue to be childcare needs. What can you do in terms of stipends? I know some organizations have been vetting providers, and those providers come to a center or a home.
Mhm.
So I think, we haven't figured it out, and it's a big one. And if we want equity and if we want inclusion, this is one that we'll have to figure out.
Right, right. Yeah, there's definitely some vendors out there like care.com, Urban Sitter. We've already talked about Bright Horizons. A lot of companies are tapping into those resources or investigating them a little bit more. Another solution that I find interesting, or is a lifestyle savings account. That's where and they can allocate those funds towards a list of things that they are willing to reimburse for. Maybe it's helping your child a computer, because all children need a computer now for their online classes if they haven't already done so in their families. That's easier for some families than others. But yeah, I think the child care issue, especially as you were mentioning, for companies that have manufacturing where people can't be at home. They've got to be in an office or their work site. What are they going to do with their children? And that's really caused a lot of creativity, as you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
There was an article in our paper last week about pandemic pods and micro schools. That can work for some. It's where people pull their resources and have maybe a class of 10 kids, but then they've got to figure out, where they're going to meet, and paying the teacher. It can be an interesting solution, except that it really doesn't help us with this inclusion issue.
It doesn't.
Because,
This is
yeah,
where class really comes up, right? That
yes,
like just there are folks that are families that are going to be fine because
yeah,
they have the resources. They have the
they have the
financial
resources.
resources, they have the family support, and this is where, as leaders, as employers, really thinking about class and how this impacts, and how are you taking care of your most vulnerable
Right,
employees in this. And that will take some creativity.
right.
But the
If
other
you want to
piece
be
of
a
this
diverse
is,
employer, you need to figure out how you're going to offer. If you have a set of employees that are able to do that, how can you make sure that there's more equitable resources across your employee base?
I think one of the things that a theme that's been coming out in the series is really this idea that you're showing your employees, your customers, your investors, you're showing the world who you are right now as an employer, right? You are demonstrating your core values, and people will remember that. And so some of this is, I always say, much of this work is simple but not easy.
Mhm.
I would say this is not simple and it's not easy, right? This is one
Right.
of probably the most complex issues that we have had to face as leaders, as organizations. So I think we should have an ongoing conversation about this as we're seeing best practices, because it's not going away.
No, it's not. I'm sure you heard the news. Google intends to be working from home until next summer.
Yep. Yep. Yeah,
and I
and I
think
think we're
you'll
going to
be alone.
see as schools open, we'll probably see schools closing. There are lots of districts that have already said that they're virtual, at least through December, but probably through the year. So, thinking about even some internal resources that you could, like, here's a budget, and what we're going to do is budget for some of these pods of care
Right.
or teaching that get to those folks, your most vulnerable employees, your frontline employees. How can you be supporting them right now? Um, and again, I would say vulnerability, flexibility, authenticity, all of those things as leaders are so important. I know that folks probably jumped on this thinking that you and I were going to be having this straight benefits conversation, and you and I knew that that was not the case. Right?
Yeah. I think one way that we could get some creativity, how just like when you and I put our heads together, we come up with all kinds of stuff. A lot of employers have put together the ERGs, the employee resource groups.
Yes.
A resource group of working parents would probably have some amazing ideas.
That's, what, I love that idea, Lori. Um, Particularly right now, and I know a couple of different organizations, like Dish Network as an example, they have an ERG for, it's like a parent's ERG. I love that idea, and I think that that could be a real, like, the creativity that comes out when people put their heads together.
Right.
So if you don't have an ERG in that space, might be a great time to start one.
Mhm.
um, or how can you tap into some of the folks that are parents to bring that coalition together, to say we're trying to figure out how to best support you here,
Mhm.
because I do think the folks are having to figure stuff out on their own. Lead them and help them in that.
Right.
So,
Right.
any last thoughts as we're wrapping up? Any last truth bombs around benefits and inclusion in this time of COVID and racial justice?
I think, well, yeah, I do think that the coping mechanism that we have all had has definitely been eroded. And, in normal times, we're able to transition and pivot and roll with punches. But with so much coming at us, our coping mechanism is just not as healthy
Yeah.
as it has been. I think that's why you see so many, videos of people going crazy and doing some really awful things
Yeah.
on social media that we've all witnessed. So I think, that is where, if you really want to do something to support your employees, probably this mental health issue, and then trying to get your hands around childcare. These are probably the two highest priorities. There's certainly a lot of other things that we can talk about. I think in our last discussion, we talked about how to make sure your benefits are inclusive for the LGBTQ plus
Right.
population. That's another discussion all in its own. But access to care can really help your employees a lot, by getting the word out on virtual telehealth, virtual visits, for not just mental health, but also medical assistance too.
Yeah.
Because again, there's the childcare problem. You can't go to the doctor because your kid's right here.
Right.
You got that responsibility. So yeah, I think those would, if you're really wanting to try to tackle some of the things that your employees are having a hard time with, those are probably the top ones.
Lori, I so appreciate this conversation. I think make sure that your folks know about, I'm going to recap what you said, right? Like, a lot of the carriers are coming out and adding, make sure that's actually getting to folks, that they know about that they're hearing about that. Think about flexibility. Think about putting together an ERG or a group of parents and getting some of their best practices, their creativity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think this is an ongoing, um, like we said, like, you're showing who you are right now. Really, let's help let's help folks through this time. Really think about class, making sure you're supporting all your folks, not just folks that are, it's easy to think about flexibility, or it's easy to think about supporting them. And let's all just keep building this more inclusive and equitable world. Thanks, Lori.
Thank you, Maureen. Great to chat with you as